Okay, I'm going to color covered glass and colored liquids in V-Ray and how to create them. I'll cover the wine here first, and then I'll cover these which were created with procedural textures. These were the different type of procedural texture, and this were the bitmap. So we'll cover that right now. This is white wine. Now, what I did is I set the refraction to these figures, 253, 240, 187. And I set my diffuse to black. Now my reflection, I brought that up relatively high. Because this is wine and I don't want to see a ton of reflections, I didn't make it as reflective as the glass. And my refractive glossiness I left at 1 because liquid is fairly reflective. If I show you the reference image, there's a whole bunch of reflections going on in here, showing the back there and in here. Even though I set this way and made the diffuse black, there's some basics which you should know about glass. I'll just get a new material in here. Glass and liquids and refraction. Now, as soon as you make this refractive, what happens is the rest of it comes from the diffuse. You know, like if this is set halfway at 50%, this is 50% refractive, 50% diffuse. So you can get a color in here. So what you normally do is you'll take the refraction and you'll set this to some color, whatever you want, you know. Now, you have to realize, though, that this now is fairly dark, so this is mainly going to be coming from the diffuse here. And it's not going to be very refractive at all. So it's always a kickoff one between the other. So normally what you'll do, or what I do, is I take the refraction and I make this relatively light. And then I take the diffuse and I make that kind of dark. There you go. Wasn't very light, was it? I make it light up here. And then I play around and I do some tests. But that's how I deal with it. Obviously, you need that on and that off. So this is one which I tested. You know, obviously both of these, I tested them again and again and again to get them right. And what I ended up doing is setting the diffuse to black on both of these, both the white wine and my red wine. And the red wine on the refraction, I set down here, so it's quite dark. But you get that beautiful thick color from the glass. You know, if you look here, you can't even see through it. It's that dark. But, you know, if you Google red wine, you often can see through. And so I wanted to give that idea. I wanted that light passing through it so I could see it. I didn't want it to just be black. So that was my refraction. Now, I set this glossiness on this one here, I set it at 0.95, and this one I set at 0.95. And the reason for that is, again, if you look at the reference image, this is blurry. You can't see through there very well. And I wanted to duplicate that. I wanted this to be blurry as well. So, you know, as you come down on the refractive glossiness, you're going to end up with a frosted type material. But you come down a little bit, and it's not really that frosted, but it is blurry through there. That's what I was trying to duplicate. Now, another rule which applies is this. If you take glass, basic glass, what you end up doing is, you know, if I set this at 1.53 is what they say is glass, and then I set a liquid at the correct liquid IOR, well, you end up where it multiplies these IORs together and it comes out wrong. So this, I'll often lower these down. Lower this down to about there, and this one I'll lower down to about 1.3, and then together they look fine. Now, another thing to know about IOR, while we're on the subject, is that these are all approximations, you know? Like, if you Google list of IOR, there we go. Now you get all of these different amounts, you know? And if you look at glass, okay, here they put 1.5. I'm used to 1.53, but there's a ton of different types of glass. So in here they've even got glass again at 1.474. So, even though mathematically this might be correct, or 1.53 might be correct, if you Google glass, glass objects, these have different index of refraction. Like the refraction through here, I know it's got a bump on it, but the refraction through here is different. Let's see if we can see something. Okay, so if you look at this image, these have various different types of IOR going on here. These are not all identical IOR. Here you can see it bent through the lattice windows back here. You can see bent through there. Here you can very clearly see this IOR and this IOR. These are not the same. If you have ever put a material on a car window in 3ds Max or V-Ray, then you'll know when they do car windows, you don't want any refraction at all. You want to be able to see clearly exactly what's happening on the outside. So glass having an IOR of 1.5 or 1.53, or leaving it at default 1.6, all of those are fine. You can come down to 1.4, you can come down to 1.0, for glass windows. They're fine. It's not a finite thing where glass has to be set at 1.53, 1.5. You have to look at the object, and you have to see what you want to do with it. And that's important when you're creating glass, because, these items, they don't have the same index of refraction going on. So if you create everything with the same index of refraction, you're going away from photorealism, even though scientifically glass has an IOR of 1.53. In reality, that's not necessarily the case. Alright, so that's the wine. Now, I've created these with Burke noise. Now, just to give you an idea of what I've done, I'm just going to do some test renders here and show you. Again, here I've set the diffuse to black. Alright, now Burke noise, you can download that from GitHub. If you look here, GitHub, Burke noise, clone or download, and you can download it. Open. And you get this. Go to SRC, go to DLL. You just need these. One of these. Depending on which version of 3ds Max you have. I'm using 2018, so I have that. I'll show you where to put it. You can go to PC, C, Program Files, Autodesk, 3ds Max, Plugins. And you just literally drag and drop it into there, Burke Maps, that's right there. And then when you open 3ds Max, you'll have Burke Maps. Alright, now what I've done here is I've set the size up nice and high. I've come up with the low. Look, if you look at these blacks, that's 0.4. If I set it back to 0, I want these to be quite defined. So I came up here to 0.4, and it brings that dark up, and this brings the light down. Like by default, that's 1, so there's more of a gradient. So I wanted to bring that down, and I ended up with 0.6. Now the noise type, simplex 3D, fractal type. You can put these on if you want. I wanted a kind of linear approach. I didn't want it to be all fractal and destroyed. So then you put these two colors. Now the reason I left this black and I set this one here really quite high, quite light, is because I was going to plug another one into the black. So the black is now, with this one, it's going to be taken over by plugging in. So there's no black left anymore. Okay, now the difference with these two is in the mapping here. Okay, offset Z 50. Offset Z nothing. So, if I come here and I set this at 500, you'll see this moves. everything else is the same. I just wanted this moving slightly and getting some color. So this green is now going in where the lights are, but it's offset by 50. So, if I change this color and make this blue, just so you can see it more easily. Okay. And then I take this green and I'm going to make this pink, just for the purpose of this, just so you can see. Now I've got this third one here. Again, everything's the same, but this is offset by 75. So I'm going to plug this into color 1, which is going to take over that pink. So let's use this pink again. Paste it in there. And this one here, we will change to green. Let's do something disgusting like that. All right. Now, if we render this, you get those different colors coming through. So it depends really how subtle you want it all to be. But this is how you can use it, and you can get all these colors coming in. And that can come out quite nice. So that's using a procedural texture to color the glass. Alright, so next we're going to cover these leaves. And this is another procedural texture here, which I've created. Now this I kind of loosely based on this reference image here. So I thought, okay, let's loosely create this. Obviously I'm not going to get the curves in with this procedural texture. You could do it with noise if you really knew what you were doing and played around. It would probably take some time to tweak it, but you could do it. But in this case, we're just going to use a procedural texture and get straight lines going across. Do. Now, I've used gradient. I like this. You just come over here, maps, general, and gradient's right there. Gradient ramp, sorry, it's right here. Now, I don't use gradient much. I do use gradient ramp. Gradient, I don't like it. You've stuck to 3 colors here. And even though it does have uses, this, I have this slider and I can move things along and put new points on and double click and change colors of this and put in another one here and change color of that. I'm not set to 3 points anymore. I'm set to as many as I want. And I can, do what I want with it. So this is exactly how I created this. So just to show you exactly what I did, I had all of these flags in. This one here I set really, really dark, like a dark turquoise, dark greeny sea color. This one here I set a little bit lighter. This one lighter still. This one I started coming darker again. Then I changed to yellow. I changed to orange. And then red. Then I came in with a dark red and another dark red. These two were the same. Right, so what you can do is, if you want to copy this color and put it over there, you can just right click copy, right click paste. And then that gives you the same color, copy, paste. So that's always a possibility. Alright, now in this case, when I was doing tests, I took this and I'd stick it in the diffuse. And that went straight in, but these are quite dark colors. So for the refraction, so you could see through it, I did a color correction here. I plugged this into a color correction, which is right there, that one. Just plugged it in. And then I adjusted the gamma contrast to 5. And I put it in there. So you can see that's just too dark. And then it came out like that. It came out quite nice. So I'll just show you what I'm talking about. If I plug that straight in there, You see suddenly there's very little refraction going on here. So I had to lighten it. And by lightening it, I get my refraction going on. You know, I could do the same. I could do the same here with these. You know, these have come out really quite dark now I've adjusted it. So I could just stick a color correction in there. And then set that at like try 3. And now it goes super pink. So I don't really want it that much. Maybe just try 2. Yeah, that's kind of nice. You can see things through. You can see all the objects. So that works. All right. So the third one here, this is just simply with a bitmap. Let's see. I'll just show you how this was made first. So first of all, it's here. Okay, if you look here, I kept adjusting this in Photoshop to get it lighter and lighter. So it would look correct. And it would look like glass. And this one I darkened and darkened. And then I put these color corrections on. And these just really desaturate slightly. So I thought it looked slightly better, desaturated. And that's really what they do. But you can do this with any bitmap. Like, you know, if I was in a rush, I would take this and, you know, someone sent me and they said, oh, yeah, this is what we want. Okay, I'll take this, drag and drop it in here. I will put this straight into the refraction and straight into the diffuse. Then I'll double click on this and I'll click, comes this cropping placement. I'll click apply and view image because I don't want this white coming through. I just want the color. So I just take this down and I'll do something like that just to get the color. There we go. Okay. Then I would take this and I'll do a test render. I'm probably going to change angle on the camera, but you can see here, you really just can't see through this at all. We've got all those colors, but I can't see through the object. So then I'll take this and I'll just go color correction. I'll just drag and drop it onto this line. Double click on this, and I like going quite high straight off, so I'll set that at 5. And I'll render. And then I ask myself 2 questions. First of all, does it look like glass now? Is it refractive? The answer is yes. And secondly, is it the right color? Because if you've gone too light, you're going to change the color of it. So it's definitely refractive. I'm not sure that's the right color. You know, the orange, it's become what? Yellow. So to change that, I'm going to make the diffuse darker. Put a color correction in the diffuse. Advanced. And I'll set this down to, just again, quite high to start with 0.5. And I just really want to pay attention to this area. Still looking a little yellow. Let's try 0.1. See where that gets us. So still this is yellow now instead of orange. So what I'm going to do is come in here and just, let's try 3. And let's do the whole thing. Okay, I think that's looking better. stop this. That's closer. A little bit off. I mean, this red light has got a light directly on it, so that's a bit off anyway, but the orange is coming through, it's just not really there yet, so try to. Okay, I got a bit too much black coming in here for my liking, so we're going to adjust this one. 0.5. Okay, so that's how I go through adjusting glass materials to match the reference image. Now, one other thing is mapping. You got to make sure it's the UVW on these is correct, and this is mapped in here correctly. Often a good way of doing it is you just get a new viewer material, because look, if I press F4, get rid of those, you can't see anything. So how can you tell if it's mapped correctly? You can only know by doing test renders, and no one wants to be sitting here doing test renders to see if something's mapped. So if you go back to your materials and you get a new viewer material, then you take this and you can just stick this into the diffuse. Okay, and then you can assign this material, and now you can press F3. Oh, sorry, F4. Okay, and show shaded material in viewport. Boom, I can see it's mapped correctly. Now, before I put the UV mapping on, it was like that. And when it comes to glass objects, I usually use planar mapping. I'll show you exactly why. So, if I use box mapping, I get weirdness here on the edges that I can't really. That's not what the client wanted at all, you know. If you use cylindrical, you know, maybe cylindrical would work. I can press 1E, rotate this 90 degrees. I think that was 90, I can't tell. I got this over there. Yeah, that's it. If you get weird mapping like this and you want to handle it easy, just real world scale on and off and it'll be correct. So that works. Spherical, it's a bit messy. Box, you're gonna get sides, face, it's good. Probably messed up, but plane normally works well. Up one, and then rotate that 90 degrees. And obviously with angles, you know, I've got this angle set to 5 degrees. So then real world on off. Whoops. And that's it. So you have to make sure that your mapping is done correctly on these objects. And like I said, you know, if the glass is assigned and you can't see it, then just you make a new viewer material. You know, it's that simple. With procedural textures, it's a little bit harder. You know, if you take this procedural texture, actually this one might work. But if I take that and put it in there, and now I assign this, and I'm not sure if that's correct or not. It might very well be correct. Alt W, come here, go back into this, press F9. Okay. Alright, so that's correct. So that one you can see. But the noise maps you can never see. So, you know, if you take this back on noise, and, you know, show shaded material in viewport, I mean, you just can't see it. So you're never going to know, you know, even if you use a usual noise maps, general noise. Even if you put this in, you know, you change this to size, I don't know. There you go. Now you can see it. Make that a little bit bigger. Let's try 10. Okay. Let's make this really obvious. So bring down some of these highs, push these up. Alright. So now we can start to see it. I guarantee this will not be the same. You see, that's vastly different. So my point is, for procedural textures here, you need to be doing test renders, otherwise you've got no hope of seeing how they're going to come out. But for bitmaps, you can just stick a UV map on and you can see how it's going to work and you're all good. Alright, I hope this is useful. That's how I create colored glass in 3ds Max with V-Ray.